Hi, I'm Tanya Johnson. I am the co-founder of the Institute of Child Psychology. We're so excited to have Dr. Davis with us today. Welcome, Dr. Davis.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Uh, Dr. Davis has done wonderful work. He is a child and adolescent psychiatrist who has worked with underserved populations in the New Mexico area for over 20 years. Dr. Davis, I have so many questions for you. I know I'm going to have to try and wait until our conference in November, so we will focus on two of the main questions that I have today. My first one is, how do we link delinquency and early childhood adversity? What is that link that's there?
Well, I think of it as a enormously strong link, for one thing. After working with youth who were incarcerated for more than 20 years, and I should say that during these 20 years was when the Adverse Childhood Experience study came out. And I can remember a time when none of us took trauma histories, or we didn't really look at early childhood experience in light of what the current condition of our patients was. And so gradually, seeing those kids and recognizing the enormous amount of adversity that they had experienced in their childhood, and continuing to read, it dawned on all of us that these two things were linked. And we later, and of course, adverse experiences, the ACE studies, the 10 ACEs, are not the only way to measure adversity, but they are a specifically great way to enter the conversation, since they're so commonly discussed. And so we looked at all the kids in a particular year who were incarcerated in New Mexico, all the delinquents. And of course, delinquents, that means they've been in the system for a while if they're incarcerated. It's more than a small infraction. And we looked at them and found that 86% of them had 4 adverse experiences or more. And that was such a robust finding, more than other research had really discovered, that we redid it and continued for another 8 years and ended up with 1,526 kids. The exact same finding came down. No, it was 1% higher. It was 87% had 4 ACEs. And 57%, almost 60% had 6 or more. And of course, these are in the toxic range. But the question still remains, though, what does it have to do with delinquency? Because we know that if you look at the Adverse Childhood Experience study itself, people with 4 or more ACEs are going to have, for example, 12 times the rate of completed suicides. They are going to have many, many times the rate of substance abuse. And what we recognize in delinquency is that it's a question of impulse and forethought and planning and self-management. Those are the real questions in delinquency. We think of delinquents as being serious criminals, but when you meet them and when you work with them, you realize they're the most compromised group I've ever worked with. They're not serious criminals. They don't plan well. They're not masterminds. They are simply impulsive, dysregulated in their mood, disturbed and unable to succeed in school or in jobs. And so delinquency really is basically a condition of dysregulation. It means there's not good problem solving. It means there's not good regulation of mood or affect. It means there's poor impulse control. It means there's not a lot of the frontal equipment that suppresses and inhibits a lot of our worst reactions. It means it's not fully developed. And so that's what I think the link is. We know that the link is without a doubt statistically associated. We've proven that beyond a shadow of a doubt. But the link itself, I think, is a matter of dysregulation. And that dysregulation extends to the ability to pursue normal, educational, age-appropriate, pro-social kinds of activities. And in the wake of that, we all know what happens if you're unable to pursue the normal life activities and have impulses and moods and aggressive thoughts and a great deal of anger left over. That is what constitutes delinquency.
You know, Dr. Davis, as you're speaking today, I almost think about the important work of childhood. And to me, the important work of childhood is starting to engage that prefrontal cortex. It's about self-regulating. And what I'm hearing you say today is that when children don't have those safe spaces in their childhood, we see these long-term ramifications. And so we might look at someone who's been in the system, but what we have failed to do is actually look at all of the building blocks leading up to where that person is in that moment of time.
Absolutely. That's a perfect way of saying it. It really is the time during childhood, during early childhood, especially when those sorts of regulating capacities, which are, eventually frontal, are being built. Basically, the hardware itself is being installed. Without that, you see enormous deficits of self-control, and like I said, planning and forethought and estimating consequences and empathizing with the needs of others. You see enormous deficits in those areas.
Dr. Davis, as we talk about our children's ability to regulate, I know that some of the important work that you've done has been to be on the Stop Spanking board. Let's talk about the parents in a child's life. So let's start with what spanking is, because I think many people are not sure what exactly is defined as spanking. So what spanking is, and then why we need to stop it.
The spanking is generally defined. If you read the literature, and a lot of literature has been written by, say, Elizabeth Gershoff or Grogan Taylor, and it's generally defined in the literature as a physical punishment without injury, without visible injury, that causes pain and is used with the intent to change a child's behavior. And so the important components of that are the fact that it's intentionally designed to change a child's behavior, and it inflicts pain as an aversive kind of approach to that change of behavior.
Got it.
The research there is a huge amount of research on this. You would not think so, but there probably over the years, some of them all the way as far back as the 80s, but there's probably 1,500 or more studies. And so when you do a meta-analysis of those studies and look for the long-term effects or the connection between spanking and behavior problems or changes in personality or behavior or mood, when you look for those, you almost need to pick the best studies, because some of those, the ones down in the 80s are just simply, associations. And so what the biggest meta-analyses have done, I think Elizabeth Gershoff did one in 2002, and I think she did another one in 2016, looking at the long-term effects and the short-term effects of hitting children. Sometimes I don't like to use the word spanking because I think it trivializes the fact that you're actually using violence on a child. So I think it's a human rights issue as well. But spanking is generally, because it is a common parenting practice, It's what we usually associate with physical punishment of children with the intent of changing their behavior. And those meta-analyses invariably, almost uniformly, as well as the individual studies, have linked child corporal punishment, spanking, with more aggression in children. It's linked it with worse mental health outcomes, more depression, more anxiety. It's linked it with poor outcomes in school. Any of the great measures that we might use for child abuse are applicable in the discussion about corporal punishment or about spanking as well. The effect might be less, although the connection is just as strong, whether you're studying the effects of abuse and neglect or you're studying the effects of corporal punishment. So there's a very strong effect size, and it rolls out like the other ACEs. It's not a temporary sort of consequence. It rolls out over the course of years, just like the adverse experiences. Like I say, it may be less in intensity, but it has the same net effect of more aggression, worse interpersonal relationships, and stronger rates of even delinquency.
Dr. Davis, I think your message and the panel that you're going to speak on in November, it's so important for parents to hear this, because I know that all parents are just trying to do the very best that they know how. But I think we do better when we know better, when we can look at that research and go, okay, I did what I thought was right, but there are other ways for me to help my child to be the very best version of themselves. And there are some of my actions are not contributing to my child being their fullest being.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good way of looking at it, because parents, like you say, want the best for their child, and they want to know how to mold that kind of behavior. So I think it's, even though spanking is very common, we're gradually dawning on us that, one, it's not effective. It's not associated with lower rates of aggression or bad behavior. It's associated with greater rates. And also, it's also associated with a deterioration in the attachment operation between the parent and the child. And so we might have been told by our parents or by our culture or by, family members that it's the only thing that works. It's exactly the reverse. It's exactly what doesn't work. And the outcomes, the long-term outcomes, are problematic.
Dr. Davis, such incredible, powerful work. I can't wait to hear more in November. Like I said, I already have tons of questions. I might try sneak in. We've got lots of different talks, but I'm going to try sneak into the panel.
Good.
So I can ask my questions too. Thank you so much for your time and also just for your work. It's life-changing.
Same to you. I appreciate the work that's gone into this wonderful conference.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.